Our Bloomberg politics team spent a lot of time in Boca Raton today, hopefully doing work, and they talked to a lot of Republican governors. One of the hotter topics was immigration, given that everyone will be watching the president's primetime speech tomorrow night, and not surprisingly, they are less than happy.
I think it would be a profound mistake for the President of the United States to use his executive authority to overturn immigration laws without the consent of the governed.
He has not worked with Congress to come up with an immigration policy that could get passed.
The President of the United States, who has punted on this issue for 6 years in dealing with Congress, and apparently through whatever he's going to do tomorrow night, continues to refuse to deal with Congress in an effective way.
Joining Mark and I now is Margaret Talev from Boca Raton. Margaret, we just listened to the governors expressing their displeasure, but it seems as though they are not happy with President Obama, but they are not all gung-ho about shutting down the government or doing anything particularly extreme in reaction to this executive order that's coming tomorrow night.
That's right. There really has been almost a preemptive push to shut down the discussion of a shutdown because, of course, for many of these guys, they're interested in running for president. It's really hard to run for president when your party is being rebranded as the obstructionist. So they want to head that off at the pass, but they all have sort of slightly different takes on what they want to do. Scott Walker says take it to court. John Kasich said if I was in Congress, I would have done more sooner. It's not over till it's over. So you see a little bit of fracturing. And then about midway through the afternoon, they all realized that Obama had gotten them into a position where they were talking about immigration instead of their issues.
Margaret, I've found at these RGA meetings, particularly after a presidential, with the presidential cycle coming up, you see a lot of competition, a little machismo. Are they competing down there and talking about immigration to see sort of who can be the most strident or the most effective critic of the president?
They are sort of trying to calibrate each of their sort of specialties. So you'll hear the, folks who were in Congress before they were governors talk about how when they were in Congress, things that they tried to do. Rick Perry trying to sort of build off of his strengths without getting himself into hot water again. They are all trying to stake out sort of what makes them different, but I think also trying to not get in any traps that they'll be caught in down the road.
Margaret, there's also often a kind of an atmospheric thing at these RGAs where one or another governor arrives and it's kind of the belle of the ball, where everyone's kind of buzzing around that person and their arrival. Who's got the best buzz down there right now?
It's really between Walker and Christie so far. Walker just because he's the Iron Man, right, of these guys. He's so battle-tested. And Christie because the victory lap is all his from election night. Christie's been sort of hanging a little bit out of the spotlight, doing more donor things. He's a little more behind the scenes. Walker, you see, ever present in the hallways, doing a lot of glad-handing, a lot of crowds coming up to speak with him.
Margaret, just give us a sense of the scale.
By the way, we haven't seen them together on a stage yet.
Right. Just give us a sense of the scale there. Are there 30 donors there, 100 donors? How many people are there besides the governors who are being wined and dined and courted in these private meetings?
Yeah, there are dozens and dozens of these folks. It's a real mix of consultants and donors. Some donors sort of popped in and out. Fred Malek was here last night to speak, did some breakfast with potential candidates this morning and was on a plane out of here. Other folks are sort of just arriving. So there's a lot of milling around, but a lot of interest from the donor community and trying to get kind of an early sense of the field.
And do you think, Margaret, among those donors, I mean, there's a lot of people like Mike Pence and others who are sort of suggesting that, saying that, look, we should have a governor who's the Republican nominee going forward. It's not necessarily going to be me, but it should be someone who's a chief executive of a state. Do you get a sense from donors who are at that meeting that they're of that view, or that they are equally open to the notion of one of the senatorial possibilities as the standard bearer for them heading into 2016?
From the donors that I've talked to who are here, there is a consensus forming that governors are better poised than Republican senators. Of course, that doesn't speak for the donors who aren't here. But what the donors I've talked to have said is that when you juxtapose the records of Republican governors against the records of Republican senators, it's just much harder to make the case about actual concrete accomplishments from their time of the last few years.
Right. Margaret, anybody there talking about either Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush as a former governor who they'd be inclined to support?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of Jeb Bush chatter simply because, number one, the immigration is going to be so pivotal to his prospects for a Republican nomination if he proceeded with it, and also because, of course, he'll be up in Washington tomorrow holding court on education. And so his absence here is sort of noticed, and he is being discussed in that sense. I'm not hearing as much Romney chatter, which is really interesting, but I think there may be a bit of a consensus, at least right now, that that's not real.